Welcome to the 2016 National Earthquake Conference. Let's have a big round of applause for all conferences and gatherings in our universe should always start with the safety briefing, and that's what we'll be doing here today. So I'd like to ask you guys to make sure you familiarize yourselves with the exits and you know where to go, with the caveat that if we have a seismic event, that is not what we want you to do, correct? So just as a little wake up here, what is it that we'll all be doing if we do have an earthquake here during the next 2.5 days? Okay, we can do better than that. Okay, let's try it again on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you for that, and thank you to the amazing SCEC and Shakeout and all the folks that have made Drop, Cover, and Hold On the iconic call to arms for people when they know that they need to protect themselves in the event of an earthquake. First thing I want to do this morning is thank all of the folks that have helped make this possible, starting with our partners at FEMA. This conference, founded by WSPIC and Patty Such, I guess, in 2000 in Seattle, was coming up on schedule last spring. The conversation started, and FEMA said, we got to do it. So they provided some seed funding and patted us on the head and said, good luck. Right, Wendy? Ed, Mike, thank you for that. But not just FEMA Building Science Branch, but leadership from FEMA and all the different divisions. And we're going to be hearing from one of their leaders this morning, too. And Craig Fugate will be here on Friday morning. So thank you to FEMA for their role in making sure that this occurred. I'd also like to thank the Next Up at Bat that immediately came forward and said, okay, you're right, it's time, let's get together. And they wrote a check. And that's the California Earthquake Authority. So we have to have a round of applause for Glenn, Janelle, Chris. You know, these resources are the starting point, and that's kind of can't get out of the gate with those. But at the same time, we've had other sponsors that have come along, and I want to thank and recognize them as well. State Farm, Simpson Strong Tie, One Concern, Open Systems, and the International Code Council. And Seismic Warning System, thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll have a big round of applause for them. And speaking of lifesavers, Kate Long, thank you for that. We have resources, and the next thing is we need a program. Okay, so this universe of organizations and the individuals that power them up came together immediately and said, we're on board. We're going to make it happen. It became the conference partners. And it's really interesting because then, you know, there's the direct support and then there's the time. And this is the group of individuals who donated time. First, Craig Fugate and Director Mark Ghilarducci and Mr. Zell said, we'll be the honorary chairs so that people understand this is serious, it's important, we need to be there. And then these folks here formed the executive committee. They came up with your theme, the agenda, they pinpointed all the right speakers, they went out and got them, okay? And when I was looking at this list, and I'm on the committee, of course, the direct involvement was by our conference project manager, who I'll talk about in a second. I was looking at this and thinking, gosh, we're in LA, and it's kind of like one of those Rodeo Drive. You know, the earthquake community is all these first name only power plays like Kate and Lucy and Wendy, you know, and Mike and all these different folks, and you see their names, Mark. When you go and look at all the folks we want to thank and all the program committees in page 34 in your program, what you'll see is those same names, Janelle and others that just keep coming up again and again. So I'd like to also thank all of you guys for stepping up each time we needed something and saying, I got that, I'll do that. And so maybe we'll have a designer bag made with all those cool names on it, right? So we also have, and all of you guys, I think, have probably interacted with them. In the back, we have Caldwell Nystrom, Project Specialist Extraordinaire, who's here taking care of every little thing. And then our fearless leader at Flash, Barbara Harrison. Barbara cannot be here this week. She's had a family emergency. And we have asked her, what can we do for you? And she tasked us. She said, I need one thing out of you. And of course, she texted me this morning, 5 o'clock. How's it going? What's happening? She said, go have the best NEC on record. And we said, we'll do it. So that's what we're going to do this week, because if we don't, I'm not allowed to go home, because I'll be in trouble with Barbara, okay? So let's talk about this NEC and what we're going to do here, and briefly. We've been doing a lot of, we have a pretty strong contingent of news media interest in the conference, so want to make sure everyone understands this is a public meeting. We're going to have members from the international press here as well as local. We've already been doing radio and other promotion because we want this word to get out of this room, right? But the theme, when I saw the original theme, I thought, wow, that's a long theme, you guys. They said, well, we have a lot of work to do. So what we're going to do for the next 2.5 days is we're going to talk about what's new. So we're going to get to learn all the coolest and greatest stuff, the science, message insights, protective actions, things like earthquake early warning, our little favorite program, Quake Smart for business. What's next? So we've asked all the speakers to throw down the gauntlet and say, here's where this needs to go, okay? And then the last piece is, what's your role in creating a national strategy? That's the question that we're going to answer when we leave on Friday. Well, let me reframe that. That's the question we're going to define when we leave on Friday. And then when we get together 4 years from now, we will have spent a steady amount of time invested in answering that question. So what are the things we're going to do to make sure that that momentum continues? Well, first, we are videotaping the conference, and then we have this fantastic table of people right here, I believe, who are recording, scribing, capturing, pointing out what they're hearing, okay, as the most important themes and the unfinished business that we need to do. We also have a live conversation. We want you to join on Twitter at #NEC2016. I'll be over there tweeting away. I'm not doing email. I'll be tweeting away. So retweet, join us, take pictures, agree, disagree, tell us what the priorities are. We've also told the public this is how they can be at this conference, okay? And then we're going to take the videotape and the magic of post-production, combine the slides, and we're going to set up a YouTube channel. And then ultimately, we'd like to take the content of this conference with our speakers' permission and turn it into webinars and useful information. I think that the executive committee theme really threw down the gauntlet for us on what they wanted to see happen. And I think we've all been to conferences that were so fantastic, but when you leave, the question is, so now what? Where does this go? How do we harness this momentum, this incubator of great ideas, and make sure that something happens? So that's the challenge, that we want you to look through that prism as you look at everything we do here this week and help us with that. But that's our pledge to you in the post-conference report and ultimately in the media that we produce out of the conference and everything else. So before I bring up, sorry, our next speaker, too many radio interviews, I guess. I want to just say thank you to everyone again, especially CEA and their leadership, Glenn Pomeroy, for understanding how important it was to do this, and to FEMA. And then to everybody who just immediately lined up. I got teased one time at our conference by Jay Berger. Is Jay here yet? Jay is not in this list. Oh, he's not going to make it. So now I get to tease him in absentia. He teased me one time because at Flash, we work on an all hazards basis, and we're a nonprofit, so really the currency of our movement is recognition and appreciation. So Jay told me one time his hands got sore clapping at a Flash conference, and I said, well, it's just the thing that we do. But heartfelt thanks to all of you for making this possible. It's very exciting. We're a little overbooked. Don't tell our fire marshals who are in the room. So get here early, as you have, and we'll have a great conference. So before I step aside, I have the privilege of introducing one of our partners from one of our founding and legacy organizations, FEMA, and that is Angela Gladwell. If in the program, Angela is here, Roy Wright is not. You'll be able to pick up on that very quickly. Angela is the Deputy Assistant Director for the Risk Management Directorate at FEMA. She and the Director at Leverage Partnerships across public and the private sector to compel the public to manage the impacts of high consequence events. I can't think of a better person to kick us off and talk about the power of public-private partnerships, Angela Gladwell.
Good morning. How is everyone this morning? I am so happy to be here today. This is my first National Earthquake Conference. And so I know that I have a lot to learn from you. I've been in my role, I've been with FEMA a long time, for 17 years, but I've been in my role in risk management, about 90 days. And so one of the great things that I'm doing now is getting out and meeting all of you, learning what you're doing, and it's very, very exciting to me. So as I have a lot to learn from you, I'm going to share just a couple of things that I know that I want to share as we go into this conference over the next couple of days. The first is that I know that the partnerships here are very strong. And they're going to be critical as catalysts for creating a nation that's safer from earthquake risks. The dialogues that are happening, the sharing of ideas, of information, building off one another's successes, they just create this amazing energy. And I know that I'm walking into this really strong history that has existed for several decades of that partnership, and it's very exciting for me. And it doesn't exist everywhere. So please relish it this week and make the most of it and use it, because it is through this partnership that we create a safer nation. I also know that there's many new faces in the room. We've had new faces at the federal level, as in the earthquake managers, in the state level, and many of our partners across the consortia that are here for the first time. And so I guess my ask of you is to embrace that as well, and bring them in and help them be part of that legacy and that partnership so that they can be successful as they start in their new roles and jobs. The second thing that I know is that risk and resilience are really understood at a community scale. And much of your work and your time and your effort is focused there. But I also know, and coming from the FEMA perspective, that the federal government plays an important role. We're helping to bring attention to the ongoing understanding and learning of the risks that exist, whether that's before or after an earthquake occurs. And our team is doing some really cool things that I know you'll learn about this week in that regard, whether that's working on the next generation seismic design value map, leading some of our work on non-ductile concrete buildings, and continuing to learn from events that have occurred and build that into our tools and resources. Advocating for stronger building codes and standards, and then serving as a leader in building stronger. One of the things that's happening across the federal government right now is a big emphasis on new standards and executive orders across the board that are really putting the federal agencies as the leaders in building higher and stronger, including, you may all be aware, the federal flood risk management standards that's happened on the flood side, and the new executive order for earthquakes that has occurred as well. And that's really, to me, an important step to show that the federal government is a leader in moving these standards forward. Certainly in the role the federal government plays in the catastrophic planning and exercise, it's really hard to talk about low probability, high consequence events without talking about earthquakes. Just thinking about the Cascadia exercise and others that are coming up, and about how we need to be prepared across the federal government to be able to support all of you in the states and in the localities in responding to one of those events. And then finally, creating national resources that everyone can use to further earthquake safety. One of the things that I'm really excited for you to see throughout the week is a new video that has been created that was produced for our first responder community, focusing on why fire departments need to be prepared so that they can support a community when an event occurs. And so these types of tools and resources we can create and be available nationwide to be able to support earthquake readiness. And I say all of this about the federal role and the FEMA role because I also know that there's concern out there about NEHRP reauthorization. And I can tell you from my vantage point that whether or not we receive it, these roles that we have and our commitment to them is not going to change. It's something that's very important to us in order as part of our efforts to manage risk in FEMA. Finally, I also know that your challenge is tough in what you do every day. And I know that many of your efforts are actually targeted towards people like me. And I want to tell you a little bit of a story about that. Because up until 2011, I have never been in an earthquake. So I live in Virginia. I work in DC. I've worked for FEMA, as I've mentioned, for 17 years. I was in DC during 9/11. I was in New York City during the blackout of 2004. I've been through some events and have taken learnings from those things. I always have a go kit. I carry a flashlight, a cell phone charger, keep tennis shoes in my office in case I need to get get somewhere unexpected. I don't live in a floodplain. I know where to go if there's a tornado, where I can be safe. I've practiced fire evacuation plans with my family. I feel like I'm a pretty good FEMite in overall preparedness. But I wasn't prepared for the earthquake that occurred in August of 2011. I was sitting in my office, as so many people in DC were, when the earthquake hit. And my first reaction was not even, this is an earthquake. I didn't know what it was. And so I went out into the hallway looking, what's everybody doing? What am I supposed to be doing now? Everyone started evacuating. So they started leaving the building, so I said, okay, that must be what I should do. So I evacuated out of the building. We went to our fire muster location across the street in front of the next high-rise and stood there until someone told us what to do. And there were a lot of lessons from that day, and then we got into typical things about, are we going to go back in the building? Do people have what they need to get home? Those types of situations. But I tell you that because I think I'm the typical person that in much of your outreach you're trying to target. Because I wasn't thinking about earthquakes. I wasn't thinking about what was going to happen. And it really takes some catalysts of the work that you're doing to be able to shift that perception. And I can say that in the couple years after that, when Shakeout came to FEMA, that I had my staff and I participated in the Shakeout exercises. We had some great after-action dialogues about that, about what people were thinking and what they did and what they were concerned about. And then people were prepared. They knew what to do. And so with that, I want you to know that work makes a difference. It does reach people like me, and it's really important. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for being here, for the work that you do and that you're going to do this week. I hope you have a great week. So can't wait to see all that's exciting that's going to happen. Thank you.
Good morning. Let me introduce our final welcome speaker to you this morning. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the California Earthquake Authority, one of our presenting sponsors this week, Mr. Glenn Pomeroy.
Well, good morning. I want to just say a word of thanks to the organizers of this incredible event. The Leslie did a nice job of recognizing so many who played such an important role in putting this conference together. And certainly want to say that Barbara will be in our thoughts and prayers in the days ahead, and as her family will as well. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this great conference. Although I must say that I am actually not a native Californian. I, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, was actually an insurance commissioner in my home state, the state of North Dakota. Now, I like this slide for a couple reasons. First of all, it reminds me of why I'm so happy to now be a Californian. But actually, this picture was taken in 1997, in the spring of 1997. And some of you FEMA professionals, I think I know exactly where I'm heading. That was a horrible winter in North Dakota. We had record snowfalls, record high temperatures, or record low temperatures rather, that persisted well into the spring. In fact, the spring never came. February gave way to March, March gave way to April, and all the snow was still laying around, and that's a recipe for disaster because you know it has to go sooner or later. And sure enough, when the melt finally began, the communities along the river, especially the Red River, which divides North Dakota from Minnesota, began to prepare for what was expected to be historic floods. And in the end, despite the best efforts of so many, for the city of Grand Forks, those best efforts weren't enough. The dikes were breached on April 17th, 1997. The town of 55,000 people entirely flooded, entirely evacuated. At the time, it was the largest evacuation of an American city since the Civil War. That record was eclipsed by Katrina. But in 1997, it was a god-awful disaster for the people of the upper Midwest. Neighborhoods, in many cases, were lost, never to be recovered. And I was insurance commissioner. And it was a very impactful time in my life. I learned so much about not only the community that comes in to help a community get back on its feet when it's been hit by a natural disaster, but it left with me such an indelible awareness of the need for us to be prepared, better prepared for natural disasters which have yet to come. That is why I am so proud to be in California now, a part of a great organization which is focused on preparation for earthquake. We have our share of earthquakes in California, as you know. In fact, it's worth just taking a second thinking about making this a little more real and asking ourselves, you know, we're pretty close to that Northridge earthquake that occurred 22 years ago. What if that were to reoccur today? Can happen. In fact, scientists say it's going to happen. 99.9% probability of a 6.7 earthquake or greater occurring somewhere in California sometime over the next 30 years. We can't point exactly where or exactly when, but we know it's going to happen again somewhere. We know where the risk is, and frankly, we're sitting right on top of a lot of it right here in Long Beach this morning. So what if the Northridge earthquake were to reoccur today? The results would be catastrophic. Upwards of $75 billion in residential damage alone. We're not talking bridges and roads and hospitals and schools here. This is damage to homes where our families live. $75 billion worth of damage if Northridge were to reoccur today. And here's the scary part. Of that amount, only $7 billion is insured. $68 billion worth of residential damage would be uninsured if it were to happen today, given the low penetration of financial preparation for this disaster. And we know that California is not unique, but this fact is what causes us to want to be such a proud sponsor of this conference. When you all checked in, did you get this logo on your room key? We did this so that we would have 24-hour access to all of your rooms. No, I'm kidding. No, not really. Just want to see if you're listening. We did this and we did this to underscore how important it is that we as a collection of experts also pay attention to financial preparation for this risk of earthquakes. As critical as it is that we tackle all the issues, we need to also face head-on into the challenges of how our communities would survive economically from an earthquake. As important as it is that we continue to advance our understanding of the science, we need to be equally committed to advancing our resiliency, both physically and economically, to this devastating risk. And this is not just true in California. According to USGS, half of the nation's population is at risk of a damaging earthquake from 42 different states. That's why it is so important that 35 states are represented here at this conference. Thank you for being here. And the organizers of this event have put together such an impressive agenda over the next couple of days. Take a look at the list of presenters you'll be hearing from. Really an impressive collection of experts from so many disciplines. Really a reflection of all of us. Who are we? Who are we collectively? We're public officials at the local, state, and federal level. We are geophysicists and scientists. We are seismologists and geologists. We're engineers and mitigation experts. We're academics, communications specialists, and disaster response professionals. We even have a few insurance nerds thrown into the mix. But what brings us together is not only our common interest in promoting a greater understanding of the risk of earthquake. What also brings us together is a need for a higher level of preparedness for when the next disaster strikes. When it comes to earthquakes in our country, we are our nation's best hope for resilience, and that's a very noble cause indeed. We're very proud to be in this quest with you. Thank you very much.